Hi, everyone, and on behalf of everyone here at Primary Source, welcome to today's webinar. I think even though we'll still have people joining us, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Liz Howell, and I am a consultant for global programs at Primary Source, and you've already heard from my colleague Jennifer Hansen, who is Primary Source's librarian and webmaster. We're both really excited to have so many of you joining us today. We know it's a busy time of year, and we're also so excited to see people from all over the United States. We have people from the Northeast, as Jennifer mentioned, from Massachusetts, from Connecticut, New Jersey, Rhode Island. We also have Pennsylvania, Indiana, and Texas represented, and I'm expecting that we'll have even more people joining us as the webinar progresses. So thank you again for joining all of us today. I want to start by just telling you a little bit about Primary Source, especially for those of you who haven't participated in a webinar or program with us in the past. Primary Source educates K-12 teachers about world histories, cultures, and global issues. We provide graduate courses, workshops, and study tours that bring global perspectives to K-12 classrooms across New England, the United States, and through programs like this that are based online, really all around the world. Today's webinar focuses on Korea, but our other programs give teachers background knowledge and teaching ideas on all parts of the world, including Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, and the United States. We also offer numerous courses and workshops that support globally minded classrooms and encompass multiple world regions. And our 7,000-piece library, which Jennifer heads up, and our growing online curriculum collection offer a wealth of international educational resources for schools, teachers, and students. Approximately 2,500 educators participate in our online and face-to-face programs each year, which means that over 200,000 students benefit from our work annually. You can learn more at us looking at our website here. It's just www.primarysource.org, and you can find out about what we're doing in the classroom, what we're doing online, and different ways that you can become involved in our organization. In our time with you today, Jennifer and I are hoping to share both resources and teaching ideas for introducing Korea to your students. I'll begin in just a moment by turning it over to Jennifer, who will share some of our favorite resources for teaching about both North and South Korea. And then I'll spend a little time with you introducing you to 3 free online primary source-based activities that we've created to help students explore the different paths that North and South Korea have taken since the end of the Korean War. As Jennifer mentioned, we will have some time for question and answer at the end, and we will let you do that by using that chat box that Jennifer's already shown to you, or by raising your hand and asking the question. But you can feel free to ask questions throughout the session. We'll record those questions and get to as many of them as we can whenever we wrap up. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jennifer now. She'll get started sharing some of these great resources with you. Jennifer?
Thanks, Liz. I'm just getting my screen pulled up here. You should see our resource guide called Korea, an Introduction to Korean History and Culture. If you can't see this, be sure to type a question to Liz in the chat box, and she will help you out while I'm talking. If you do have any questions, I'll be checking back on the question box in just a few minutes. But you can ask them at any time, and Liz can interrupt me. You can raise your hand to ask a question, or as I said, you can type it into the chat box or the question box. The resource guide that you're seeing right now, as I said, is Korea, an Introduction to Korean History and Culture. This is one of over 60 resource guides created by Primary Source here in the library. And we create these guides for teachers. You may be familiar with this, bibliographies that you see at your local public library, or research guides that you may have seen when you were in college on your college library's website. So what we've compiled here, especially about Korea, are books, fiction, nonfiction for teachers, as well as children and young adult books. We also have curriculum suggestions, both print and online curriculum, as well as films and websites that you can use in the classroom. So I'm just going to take you through this quickly and show you the kinds of materials that you can find here. Of course, you can always come back to this. The URL is resources.primarysource.org/Korea. You can take a look at it now while I'm talking, or you can watch me on the screen. From the home page, you would just use these little purplish blue boxes at the top to navigate through the guide. On our curriculum page, we have print units from the Stanford Program on International and Cross-Cultural Education, otherwise known as SPICE, as well as recommendations for curriculum from Choices located at Brown University. These are print units that you see here at the top. Online units that we highlight are from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Korea Society, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Archives. You can see these websites that are listed here. If you just click on any of these links, it will open those pages. One that I wanted to highlight is from the Choices program. They have a section of curriculum that they put on their website called Teaching with the News, addressing current events, what's going on in countries around the world now. And so one that they have that's really nice on Korea is North Korea and nuclear weapons. Their Teaching with the News lessons are very brief. They're usually just a one-day kind of a quick lesson. If you're already teaching about Korea, or if you teach a current events class or a global education class, this would be something that might fit into that. So they have a lesson plan. They have background readings that you can download. Some of their Teaching with the News features will include videos from scholars, as well as primary source documents. So here we have, these are videos from scholars, The Challenge of Nuclear Weapons. And so you could just play all of these right through their website. I see that we might have a question. Okay. Another lesson plan that we've uploaded to this website is called A Single Shard. This is curriculum that was developed by middle school teachers at Whitman Hanson Middle School here in Massachusetts. If you teach a book by Linda Sue Park, A Single Shard, you'll find this lesson to be very useful. The teachers have been teaching this book for many years in their classes, had never really done a lot of written curriculum around it, and they took a 3-day course with Primary Source on Korea, and as part of that course created this lesson plan as part of their graduate credit curriculum project. So you can scroll through here and see they have a learning station model that they use with this lesson plan. They have students creating pottery, which is part of the book. They do a Google Earth tour. They look at geography of Korea, flags of Korea, looking at similes that are used, and then also at food and food containers in Korea. They have vocabulary. Any of the materials here can be downloaded. You can use this directly as it is created in your classroom, or of course you could modify it for your own needs. And that's located on this curriculum page in the box titled A Single Shard. It's just that PDF download there at the bottom. On our books page, we have a number of recommendations about books on art, architecture, and style in Korea. We have nonfiction books on Korea and North Korea and South Korea, looking at their history, culture, The Two Koreas here by Dan Oberdorfer. These are just recommendations. If you want to locate the book, most of these books are located in the Primary Source Library. As many of you are not located close to Primary Source, you could find these in your local public library. And if they don't have them, you could request an interlibrary loan. But these are titles that we think are useful for teachers, things that are located here in our library that teachers check out all the time. One book that I wanted to highlight is this great graphic novel, Pyongyang by Ghee Delisle. This is one that is just, he's done a number of graphic novels. It's a kind of a travel log of his time as a cartoonist in Pyongyang in North Korea. A new fiction book that's out that came out earlier this year is The Orphan Master's Son by Adam Johnson. You've probably seen it on the New York Times bestseller list, or if you have been in a bookstore recently, it's usually on those front-facing shelves or tables. Under children's and young adult books, we have here picture books for younger elementary readers. We have fiction for middle school, and we have fiction for high school. There are a number of books that we could add to this. especially the picture books. We have kind of selected 10 or so that, again, we find to be very useful and that we know that teachers find to be useful. You'll see a number of books here by Linda Sue Park, A Step from Heaven by An Na for high school, and Suknil Choi, also a very well-known Korean author who has written both a number of middle school fiction books and picture books. On the films page, we have a number of films listed here, as well as trailers that you can view. Here at the top, we have films from PBS and Wide Angle, as well as A&E that are listed. All of these are documentaries. On the right side of the page, we have a couple of feature films listed. I have included here trailers that you can watch. So if you're interested in this Families of Korea film, you can watch a short trailer just to get a taste of what the film might be like and see if it's right for your classroom. There's also films like Crossing Heaven's Border. This is from Wide Angle, from PBS, looking at North Korean defectors from the view of South Korean journalists. You can watch the whole film on the Wide Angle website. You can also view a lesson plan that uses clips from this film. So if you don't have time for the whole film in your classroom, you could just use clips that are included in this lesson plan. Another film that's entirely available online is Inside North Korea from National Geographic. You can watch it right through this page, or if you click on, after you click play, if you click on the film again, it will take you to the YouTube website where you can watch it. And this takes us to our websites page, where the websites and the Korea in the News pages are the last two pages of this guide. We're going to spend a little bit more time here. On the websites page, since this is online resources for teaching about Korea, the websites page has kind of informational pages about North Korea and South Korea, statistics, their country profiles from the BBC. The New York Times has a really nice country page for pretty much every country in the world. This is it on the screen now. You can see for North Korea, for example, it has kind of a bit of an overview. It will have photo galleries, multimedia, and then articles. So kind of an archive of articles written about North Korea over the past few years. This is a really nice place for kids to do research on a country. I've included the direct links to the pages. But you can also search, if you're doing other Asian countries or East Asian countries. You can also find, if you just Google the name of the country, New York Times, their country page will usually come up. Under websites and articles, we have a number of kind of overview websites with historical and cultural information about Korea, as well as articles from Time Magazine, from Spice Digest, or from the Asia Society that you could easily use, definitely with high school kids. They could also be great learning tools for yourself just to build your knowledge base about Korea. Under the Korean War, we've gathered a number of websites about the Korean War, primary source document websites, overview websites, and websites with lesson plans. The Korean War, police action, and teaching with documents, the United States enters the Korean conflict are also listed on the curriculum page of this resource guide. And then we have magazines and newspapers about Korea that you can subscribe to. If you have a large Korean population in your school, this might be something that you're interested in. The Korean Quarterly, most of these you can read online, but you can also subscribe to these newspapers and magazines. The Korean Quarterly is about $25 for a one-year subscription. It's great. So, if you are a librarian or you want to recommend these to your school librarian, these could be great periodicals to add to your collection. On the left side here on the bottom, we have a box with resources about Korean art. The Korean Art Museum Association is actually a Google Art Project website. I hope everybody's familiar with the Google Art Project. I don't have a lot of time to talk about it today, but it's a really fantastic site. What you're seeing here, the Korean Art Museum Association, this is over 4,700 artworks by over 100 artists in Korea. It's promoting Korean art. So all of this has been digitized and put on this Google Art Project website. If you click on an image, it has fantastic zoom in and zoom out features, so you could project it in a classroom and really analyze pieces of art. As you can see for the Korean artwork, this is very contemporary Korean art. For more historical art, or maybe more traditional art in Korea, the Metropolitan Museum of Art has a great collection. They have thematic essays on their website. There's 13 thematic essays. They also have 54 digitized artworks that are listed on their website, and you can click on these and get larger images. So if you are an art teacher or you're doing a lesson on Korea and you want to include some artwork, especially if you're teaching a single shard, pottery is included in that, this is a great place to get information about Korean art. The Metropolitan Museum also has a fantastic resource guide, The Arts of Korea, that you can download for free from their website, and that is listed on the curriculum page. But the Met just has some really fantastic websites or resources. On the right side of the website's page, we have an East Asia box. Teaching Korea in context with Japan and China, is always important. And these websites, Asia for Educators, the Asia Society, the Stanford Program on International and Cross-Cultural Education, all have resource pages dealing with East Asia more broadly. You can find materials on any East Asian country, including Korea. But we wanted to include this here to kind of give you ways to access information about East Asia more broadly. On the Korea in the News page, this is one of my favorite pages on all of our resource guides. This has news feeds from all over the world. So we have the Korea Herald here. These links will update daily as the website itself updates. So just like the New York Times or Boston Globe or Philadelphia Inquirer, any of those websites might update. The Korea Herald box will update. All of these boxes will update daily. So if you are interested in looking at how maybe Eastern and Western media are reporting a particular story, this could be a great place to come and find those different perspectives. So we have the Korea Herald, the New York Times. They have a North Korean feed and a South Korean feed. The Guardian also has a North Korean feed and a South Korean feed. So a British perspective, American perspectives, and Korean perspectives. On the right side of this page, these are more Korean perspectives. Global Voices is a blog they're called citizen media stories. So basically, these are blogs being written by Korean bloggers in North Korea and South Korea. So sometimes you'll find on Global Voices, on these pages, you might find articles in the language of the country as well as in English. So that's what we've included here on the right side, the Global Voices North Korean feed and the Global Voices South Korean feed. And of course, we are never too far away from Psy. I think he just became the most watched singer on YouTube. So right now, any news coming about Korea is going to include something on him. This resource guide is freely available on our website. We encourage you to use it, share it, let your colleagues know about it. If you have a department website, put the link on there. You can print the guide here at the top. If you use an RSS reader, you can also set an RSS feed so that anytime we update this, you'll get a notification. There's also this share box. So again, if you are on Twitter or Facebook, Tumblr, any of those social media sites, you can access the share features right through the page. You can also search the guide. So if you were searching, if you wanted something on the Korean War, you could type that into the search box. And then you can also print individual pages. If you have any questions about the resources on the guide or how to find something, you can always send me an email. My contact information is on the right side of every page. My email address is jennifer@primarysource.org, or you can just click the send email link and that will send you to your mail client. If there's any questions, you can raise your hand or put those in the question box. I'm going to turn the webinar back over to Liz now. And she will continue by showing you some online curricular resources that Primary Source has developed.
Fantastic, Jennifer. Thank you. So as Jennifer said, I'm kind of going to make the transition from our free online resource guides to our free online curriculum. And I'm really excited to introduce you all to this resource, which is called Primary Source World. And I think Jennifer is going to type that URL into the chat box so that you can all have that if you'd like it. This site, this Primary Source World, features teacher-approved and a lot of times teacher-created classroom activities that are designed around free primary sources and informational text. So while we didn't actually create this with the Common Core in mind, as we're learning more and more about the Common Core, we're seeing that a lot of these activities really do support those standards. So we're hoping that teachers will look to this as a resource for that as well, and thinking about going global within the standards. Each cluster contained in Primary Source World includes 3 activities and all of the supporting information that you and your students need to explore these topics. And we've chosen topics that we think are often misunderstood or maybe not represented in many classrooms. So you can see some of the different titles that we do represent here. And although the Korea activities that we'll be looking at today in this Korea Chronic Challenges, Continued Hopes, these are focused on middle and high school students. You can see that a lot of the clusters, like this cultural snapshots of daily life in Japan, or the arts for China, and then also preserving culture and history in Africa. These are created for middle school and lower elementary students as well. So there's something for everyone here. And hopefully, even if you teach the younger grades, as we start to look at the Korea cluster, you'll be able to find resources and teaching strategies that work for your students as well. So I'll go ahead and open up the actual Korea cluster. And you'll see that whenever you open the main cluster, you'll take to the main page, and that's where you can see the rationale for creating this cluster and why it's worthwhile to teach these topics. And you can also get a glimpse of the 3 different primary sources on the left side here that are featured in the activities. And this is also where you will go to hit these tabs to take you through to the different lesson features. For each Primary Source World activity, including this one on Korea, the first tab is called the Background Essay tab. And as it implies, this includes a background essay written by a scholar. In this case, the scholar is from Tufts University. And the scholar has written this background essay primarily to give teachers some background knowledge on the topic and on the lessons. But it could also be used, certainly if you were teaching high school students or maybe AP students. It's a high-level informational text that could really enhance their understanding of the lessons and the activities. And as I said, this was written by a scholar, Sung-Yoon Lee in this case, and each activity and all of the resources in this and other Primary Source World clusters have actually been reviewed by scholars. So they've been examined for accuracy, they've been looked at in terms of reliability and balance. So there's been a real effort in creating these to make sure that you're getting information that you'll feel comfortable and confident presenting with your students. So on the background essay tab, in addition to the essay itself, you'll also find a multimedia component. And you can see here that this is a NewsHour clip from PBS talking about the relationship between North and South Korea. But different clusters have different types of multimedia sources. Some are Google Earth tours, some are links to interactive timelines, a lot of different types of sources that can kind of support your students in their learning of this topic. So that's the first tab in this Korea section. And then the last tab, I'm going to temporarily skip these 3 middle ones. This last tab is a further resources tab. And this is where Jennifer certainly put a lot of time in. For each of the topics covered in the cluster, we have a correlating resource list that includes books, websites, films, if it makes sense to include those. And each of these resources has been vetted by the person who wrote the activity, by Jennifer, our librarian, and then also by a scholar to again make sure that you're getting really high quality recommendations. And these are fantastic not only for your use, but if any of these topics are ones that you'd like to have your students explore in a bit more depth, these are great kind of starting places that you know are going to be high quality, you know they're going to be easily accessible, and you know that they're going to be reliable. So I'd encourage you to check those out, even if you're not sure exactly how you would fit these topics into your classroom. They're just great for learning and teaching about Korea in general. So those are kind of features that are included in every cluster, the background essay and the further resources. And now I think we'll just dig into the actual activities so that you can see how they're structured and hopefully take away some ideas for teaching about Korea. The first activity that we have here focuses on South Korea and on South Korea's industrialization and its economic growth following the Korean War. And you can kind of see the layout of each activity here. For every activity in the cluster, you'll have a short bit of background information. Again, this could be used for your own information, or you could share this with students. There are grade level suggestions and key questions that frame the activity. So this one, as you can see, is really about the economy post-Korean War, how South Korea grew, what contributed to the growth, and how this growth really affected the lives of the Korean workers. Each activity also has key terms, and in some cases, links to outside maps or resources to help support student understanding of those terms. We have links so you can download any of the worksheets or supporting documents used in any of the activities. And then each activity also has a pre-learning or activator activity, an activity based around a primary source. And then most of them also include extension activities in case you want your students to take it one step farther. So for this activity, as I said, they'll be looking at the economic growth in South Korea following the Korean War. And the pre-learning activity really focuses on digital visual literacy. So students are looking at information that they find on the internet, they're looking at visuals, and they're gleaning these graphs and these visuals for information. And the first graph is a graph of gross domestic product in South Korea since 1980. And I'm just going to pull this up on my screen. This is downloadable, as I said, as a PDF, as a handout. And if you were to look at this, I think you'd probably have some of the similar reactions that your students would have. And you're welcome to share your feedback or your thoughts throughout these activities in the questions box. Basically, I would ask students to follow a fact, infer, question protocol on this. What do you know? What can you kind of infer based on this graph? And what questions do you have? And I think, like many of you, your students would come up with similar responses. The fact is that there's clearly been a huge increase in economic production in South Korea from 1980 to 2010. It's very obvious, and you could have students actually break down the numbers, do a comparison with other countries, but it's very clear from the very beginning of this graph that this growth is just huge. The inferences there could run the gamut. They could be almost anything. Students might infer that something has changed. Students might infer that industrialization has taken place, that there's been a change in technology, that workers have worked more hours. No telling. And then the questions, of course, will also vary. So this is a great way to get students to start thinking about, yes, there's been growth in the Korean economic system, and then what has happened to create this growth? And to answer that question, or at least to take it one step farther, we'd ask students again to look at another chart or another graph. And we have links to these and other supporting graphs right here in the pre-learning activity. And the first one I would have them look at comes from the New York Times, from a Business Day entry. And looking at this graph of hours worked according to the OECD in 2008, your students would follow the same protocol: fact, inference, question. And very quickly, a few facts become apparent using the numbers and then also just looking at the graph itself. You can see the average number of hours worked here is about 1,700 hours per year per worker across OECD member countries. You can see that some countries like France and Germany work around 1,500 hours per year. You can see that the United States is right around 1,800 hours a year, so pretty close to the average. And then if you continue going up the list here, you find that Korea, which here is South Korea, works the largest number of hours per year at 2,256 hours a year. Your students would probably be able to make lots of inferences and form lots of questions thinking about that, but it becomes especially interesting whenever you compare this graph with this information and ask your students, how did these two graphs inform your thinking about this topic? How did these two graphs inform their thinking about what's happened between 1980 and 2010 to increase the gross domestic product? And how might, as this pre-learning activity makes the case or makes the link for the primary source activity, what can we infer and how might this relate to the experiences and lives of Korean workers, which is really what the heart of this primary source activity is about. So moving from that pre-learning activity to the primary source activity, we find that students are going to think about the history of industrialization in labor unions. And we've created another downloadable handout here. It's a South Korean industrialization fact sheet. And for this fact sheet, students can look at the timeline from the end of the Second World War all the way up to 2010. And then also read some information and some quick labor facts about workers' experiences in South Korea. So really getting at the human dimension of those numbers and of the data that they saw in the graph. As they finish reading or looking over or reviewing, however you want to, that industrialization fact sheet, we then provide students with an image. And the image you can take from either the Korean Times or from CNN. And this is an image of workers in South Korea, union workers, on strike at an auto plant in South Korea. And you see the riot police here trying to break up the strike. If I were giving this to students, I wouldn't tell them what was going on first. I would just say you see union workers in South Korea and you see riot police in South Korea. And I would use that same fact, inference, and question protocol that you used at the beginning in the pre-learning activity and have students do some thinking based on the pre-learning activity and also on the information on that industrialization fact sheet about what they think might be going on here. What might the workers be protesting? Who might they be? And what might the riot police be doing? So as you have students do this protocol of think, infer, fact, question, all of these different analysis techniques with this image, you have them think maybe about one specific person in this image. And that's where we take this to a Tableau activity. And that activity is described in detail here in steps 5, 6, and 7. And basically you're asking students to silently recreate the scene in the photo, where each person takes on the persona of a character in the photo. And once they've rebuilt this photo, they kind of freeze in that position. And in a few moments of quiet, they think about what the person might be thinking, might be feeling, might be wondering. And then you as the educator would walk around the room and tap students on the shoulders. And when they feel your tap, they speak out loud in the first person the thoughts or the questions or the feelings that that person in the image might be seeing. And here in step 8, we have some examples. If there's a question, they might be talking from the point of view of a police officer. And they might say, do they have to protest in this way? The factory is never going to give in. Or it might be a thought, as in, I hope this doesn't turn violent. Fighting for a fair wage doesn't seem worth it. And on and on. This is a great way to give students not only the chance to analyze a photograph in real detail, but to put themselves in someone else's shoes and to draw on that informational text and draw on the data to really inform themselves about the image. After a discussion breaking down the activity and talking about their experiences, I'd then introduce one more primary source, and that would be an article about the image so that they have a little context. And once again, we have the link to the article right here. It's from a Korean newspaper that provides context for the image and helps students round out their understanding of what it is the labor union is fighting for and what the issues are. After that, the best way to synthesize is to continue on with each of these pieces and build on the information from the article, from the pre-learning activity, from the industrialization fact sheet, and from the Tableau experience to create a profile of one of the characters in the image. And once again, we do have a worksheet that you can download for students to use as a character profile worksheet. And this character profile worksheet provides all the prompts they need to think about the position of either a labor union member or a police officer, including how they might feel, how they might think, and what the opposition's viewpoint might be. The extension opportunity for this activity is taking it one step further. So after they've thought about how South Korea developed economically following the Korean War, then the question is, how did North Korea develop? And although the activity doesn't go into great detail, it does show students a picture taken at night of a satellite image of North Korea and South Korea. And it asks students again, what's a fact that you know, what inference can you make, and what questions do you have? And this picture automatically leads students to the understanding that North and South Korea developed very differently economically, as you can see in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the electricity, and of course those correlations to the economy. So this is just one way that you can take the learning about South Korea and take it one step farther to think about the region more generally. So that is the first activity. The second activity focuses on North Korea and its experience following the Korean War and the division at the 38th parallel. And this one focuses on food and the food shortages that have chronically plagued North Korea. As you can see, we have a background information again and the primary sources at the side, along with terms, key questions, and the pre-learning activity. And this pre-learning activity really helps students think about what a famine is, what malnutrition is, and how widespread it is. And they also start to think about some of the causes and potential effects of malnutrition on a large scale. In part, students will look at the etymology and the roots of the words of famine and malnutrition. And they will also look at this map that shows deaths due to malnutrition globally. So you can see in the United States, this is a very small representation of the United States because there aren't many deaths in our country due to malnutrition, versus India over here, where you see that there are a lot of deaths related to malnutrition. And if you help students find Korea and the Korean Peninsula on this map, they'll start to see the difference between North Korea and South Korea as they're represented in terms of malnutrition. And this can lead to lots of questions about why this discrepancy exists and what life might be like living in North Korea with this famine and malnutrition as a reality. So as these questions are on people's minds, they transition on to the primary source activity. And this is a good time to introduce students to a bit more information about the long food shortages, about the one in 1990s, and the primary source activity does provide some supporting information here. The activity asks students first and foremost to think about some of the causes of food shortage and to think about the environmental factors and also the man-made factors that contribute to food shortages and ultimately to famines. And they really are introduced to the idea that there's a debate in the international community about the causes of North Korea's food shortages and famines in particular, with on one side in the North Korean government arguing that environmental issues are the real problem that are causing these shortages, and other organizations and other countries arguing that in fact it's North Korea's handling of the food and the food aid that has exacerbated food shortages and really caused the famines. So students are introduced to this kind of different perspective, and there are lots of resources out there to explain each side. Students also learn about the fact that the United States, China, and other countries, including South Korea, provide a lot of food aid or subsidies to North Korea, and that this is a somewhat contentious issue. So students are challenged for the main part of this activity to examine evidence, which we'll look at in just a bit, and to think about if the United States should continue to provide food subsidies to North Korea, and if so, what conditions should be put on these subsidies. They're given the role of a US government worker who needs to think about, first of all, are there health effects that are being experienced in North Korea because of food shortages, and what are they? What the pros and cons are of contributing to a humanitarian cause in another country, and what the political ramifications and motivations might be in terms of the United States or other countries aiding North Korea. So they go through this kind of role where they think about the evidence and they think about whether or not the United States should support Korea in this way. And we provide them with two pieces of main evidence to consider. And the first is a height chart of Koreans in 2004 and 1939. So I'll pull these up. And again, these are linked to right here in the lesson. And we'll start with the one on bottom. And again, I'd love for you to share your feedback or your thoughts in the questions or in the chat. Looking at this bottom graph, you'll notice that there are two bars. And the first bar here in orange represents North Koreans' height. And the bar here in yellow represents the height of South Koreans on average. And you'll also notice that this is in 1939, so before the division of the peninsula. And you'll notice that on average, North Koreans are actually a bit taller than South Koreans. However, when you look at a similar graph looking at the height discrepancies in 2004, so after many years being divided and under different governments, you see that things have really changed. The green bars show average male heights, and the blue bars show average female height. And you see that the dark green is North Korean men, and the light green is South Korean men. And you see the same trend of North Koreans being on average shorter than South Koreans in both genders. And this leads to a lot of interesting questions about what happened between 1939 and 2004 to cause this stunted growth and to accelerate growth in South Korea while stunting growth in North Korea. And it's a fascinating way for students to analyze a graph and to make connections between what's going on with food and food shortages and to start understanding some of these real implications of health and access in North and South Korea. So this is the first piece of evidence that they would look at in their role as an advisor to the United States government. The second piece of information that they would look at is also linked to here, and it's a Washington Post article. And this article goes into, at the beginning, a bit more detail about some of the physical ailments that arise as a lack of nutrition increases in North Korea. Everything from the discrepancy in height to 25 pounds less on average that boys growing up in North Korea weigh. It also takes into account the effects on intelligence and IQ, this lack of food and this hunger-caused disability. So it goes through some of these health-related issues that result from the food shortages. And then it goes into kind of how people in North Korea are trying to secure food, and also into the political dimensions of food aid and what different countries have to stand to gain and to lose and what the motivations are. So this is the second key piece of evidence that students will examine in this activity. And again, this is a great Common Core one because you're looking at a really high-level informational text in terms of this Washington Post article, and you're pairing it with visual information and visual text. And both of these are key features of the Common Core. So after students analyze both of these types of evidence and these pieces of evidence, they'll follow the discussion prompts written in the article and written here in the lesson, and then as a class have to debate and have to decide whether or not the United States should or should not cut off food aid, and if they don't, what restrictions or conditions should be put on North Korea. This is a really real-world contemporary topic that hits on so many skills and is really interesting to students. And I think it's a great way to dig into a different side of North Korea than perhaps they see in the news, with the focus primarily on weapons and military strength. And then the extension activity for this section takes the study of North Korea from the theoretical to the practical, and it asks students to write a fact-based letter advocating for or against sending food aid to North Korea. And they would write this letter and actually send it to their state representative or their congressman or congresswoman. And again, this is a real world application, using the facts, using the evidence, using their writing skills, and actually taking a stand to make something practical that they've learned on a more theoretical level. Now, the final activity that I want to show you is one that actually addresses both North and South Korea. We talked about South Korea industrialization. We talked about North Korea and the food shortage. And this one is an issue that is important to Koreans living in North Korea, South Korea, and actually all over the world. And it's the issue of Korean unification. And as many of you probably know, the Korean Peninsula was united for 500 years before it was divided. So there's a real history and an emotional sense of belonging on both sides of the border. And this activity is meant to get students to think about what this division mean once the 38th parallel was established, and what the demilitarized zone there symbolizes, and what the attitudes are to unification in North Korea, in South Korea, and in communities around the world. So for this pre-learning activity, students are actually going to be looking at an album cover that is created by a band based in California. And I'll pull up this album cover here. And the album that they'd be looking at is No Man's Land. You see that there are two other that could be very interesting as well, Reunify and Never Surrender, but they'd be looking at No Man's Land. And we've created a worksheet that students would use with this to help them analyze each section or each part, each symbol of this album color, and think about what the colors mean, what the symbols mean, and what even the text and the title mean, and what it can tell us about this particular band's attitudes towards the DMZ, towards the division of Korea, and about unification. And in this discussion, students will start to think about what different perspectives about unification might be, depending on whose play is at stake. If they're thinking about North Korea, what would they have to gain and lose from unification? What would people in South Korea have to gain and lose? And how might the people living around the world in diaspora feel differently or the same as people there? So that's kind of the beginning of that pre-learning activity, just to introduce the idea and to get students thinking. During the actual primary source activity, students will really dig into the song itself, and they'll have an opportunity, first of all, to listen to the song, and you can play the song directly through that website that I showed you, or we have the song embedded right here, so you could play that song for students. And then after playing the song and thinking about how it makes them feel and what sounds and how songs can be used for political purposes, students will actually examine the lyrics in a bit more detail. And you can access the lyrics by clicking again here, right in the website. And I would ask students to carefully read these lyrics, to underline words or phrases that are particularly vivid or mean something to them, to circle words, perhaps like chosun, that don't mean anything to them and that they want to ask about and find out about so that they can better understand the song and its purpose. And after students read through the song on their own, I would lead a discussion. And I would think again about how the song makes you feel and what these words mean and what the goals of the band are. What side do you think they stand on? And I would also, once kind of the song has been established in the band's position, think about how that might compare and contrast to someone in South Korea. For instance, it's clear that the band wants this union to take place, but many students today in South Korea are worried about what would happen to them economically if the two Koreas were joined and South Korea had to pick up some of the health and economic issues that the North has neglected. And similarly, some people in North Korea also don't want this union to happen because they have such different perspectives and thoughts as people in South Korea. So it'd be interesting to compare based on students' background knowledge. The final step in this is to dig even deeper and to assign each student with one lyric. So again, I'll go back to the lyrics here. And each student would take one line from this lyric and be charged with illustrating it based on their prior knowledge, based on their understanding of this topic, and just on their own interpretation of each line. Students would then hang each line up in order so that the whole song is represented visually around the room. And then they do a gallery walk so that they would be able to learn about other people's perspectives and interpretations of this song. And a discussion after that could really help students think about how music, how words, how language can be interpreted and used to explore a real historic topic and a position and a point of view. And the last type of extension for this cluster and for this activity is to have students think about a political issue in their own town or community or country and either write a song or create an album cover that they would use to take a stand on that issue. So much like the band DMZ38 has done, to really personalize something that matters to them and to try to affect people's thinking through verse or through artwork. So these are 3 activities and so many resources that we hope you could either incorporate in some way or even just bring the lesson right on into your classroom. And again, this, like the Korea resource guide, is free. We encourage you to share the resource with your friends, with your colleagues. And I really would, this was a quick quick overview. I'd encourage you to come back to read those essays, to dig in. It's not only interesting and will hopefully give you a lot of new information and knowledge, but hopefully some connections and ideas for teaching your classroom too. So I have been talking quite a bit, and Jennifer had the floor before that. So I think we'd like to go ahead and give you the floor now and open it up for questions. And as Jennifer said, you can share questions in the question box here, asking specific questions about resources or more general teaching strategies. Or you can raise your hand and we can unmute you so you can speak your question into your microphone for us. So I'll go ahead and open that. And Jennifer, if you have anything to add, please feel free to jump in. And Jennifer, it does look like we have a question. I'm not sure if you can hear me though.
Yes, I can.
Okay, sorry. We had Marcy asking, she said you gave a lot of great resources and she knows that there's a tab on that resource guide that has has resources for younger grades, but do you have any favorites in terms of books or resources for the elementary classroom, especially a classroom that has a lot of Korean students in it?
Yes, I really like bibimbap, which is about a Korean dish, and it's about a mother helping, or about a child helping her mother prepare bibimbap. There's also, oh my goodness, there's a number. The name jar, that's about, how you get your name. I think that's also listed on the resource guide. We had somebody donate over 30 picture books to the library a few years ago, and I've put some of those on the resource guide, but I have a number of other books. If there is something specific that you're interested in for the elementary grades, feel free to email me and I can send you a bigger list. But I especially like bibimbap and the name jar.
Thanks. And I also see that we have kind of a technical question from Martha. She's asking if the essays can be downloaded, and I'm guessing those are the essays from the primary source world. And yes, those can all be, all of the lessons, all of the information can be printed out. There's absolutely, you're welcome to do that. And that website will be up, and you're welcome to go to that and print out each page or the entire curriculum cluster. Let's see. It also looks, oh, I think we already addressed that question, Marcy, but if you have other questions about resources for first or second graders, feel free to email Jennifer. And again, feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question or even share a teaching idea that you have. Oh, we have someone here who's mentioned the Korea Society having a lot of interesting, incredible information on Korean culture and history. And that's certainly something to check out. The Korea Society has lots of information and are usually very supportive of teachers in terms of sharing resources with them as well.
Yes, and there's a link to their website on the curriculum tab of the resource guide that I showed.
Ooh. Jennifer Francis has a question for you. She says, for the elementary classroom, she's teaching colonial America to Korean students, and she would like to make a connection to the topic of colony and other locations and times. Are there any good, simple sites or resources other than My Name Was about Japanese colonial rule?
I would recommend My Name Was Kyoko. There's also there's another. Just a second. That's a tough question. Let me look it up. The other book.
Explore that. I can't remember if any of Suki's early books explore Japanese colonial rule.
Yes, A Year of Impossible Goodbyes by Neil Choi would be a good book for that. And then the sequel to that, Echoes of the White Giraffe, is the young girl in that first book, The Year of Impossible Goodbyes, adjusting to refugee life. But The Year of Impossible Goodbyes is looking at a young Korean girl escaping to South Korea after being, after the Japanese and Russian occupations in the 1940s. Those would definitely be, I would say, probably fourth grade books. There is another book by, it might be too old, it might be for high school. But as far as websites go, I would have to look that up. Francis, can I email you? I have your email address, and I can email you some sites.
That'd be great. And again, if anyone does think of specific questions, you can always email us after the fact and we'll get back to you if we can. Jennifer, a lot of questions for you about resources. Benjamin also is wondering what topics and resources you would recommend for pre-20th century Korean history. I know that a lot of those great art resources would be fantastic, including the Metropolitan essays. The museum has great historic essays to complement their artwork, but I don't know if you have other favorite books or topics that go into that.
Yes, just a second. I'm searching the catalog.
Sure, absolutely. As you're looking, I can also let you know that someone shared that there are great teacher fellowships to South Korea through the Korea Society. If you're interested in traveling, I would go to their website and look into their study tours for teachers as well.
There's a series of books, to get back to the question about pre-20th century, there's a series of books, and I don't know that they are actually available in the United States. They were compiled by the Special Committee for the Virtual Museum of Korean History, but they are looking at the different dynasties in Korean history. So there's the Koryo dynasty, and they're really great children's books. I can send you the titles of those, and somebody donated them to us, so I would have to find out. I think they purchased them in Korea. But Benjamin, I will jot down your name, and I can send you the whole list of that series.
Fantastic. And it looks like we have a hand raised. Jennifer, do you want to unmute her, or would you like me to?
Sure, I can do it. Go ahead, Patricia.
Hi, I've just sent an email, so I'm just going to put it in an email.
Okay, all right.
That's just as easy. Thank you, Patricia. And then we also had some of our favorite resources for older students. I know that, Jennifer, you can chip in on this, but I really love Jennifer's idea of using the websites and using the URLs and international news feeds. I think not only is it a great way to look at what's happening in Korean newspapers, but it'd be really interesting to also look at the same issue as it's represented in Japanese newspapers and maybe Chinese newspapers to see how something that's going on in Korea is covered in different parts of the region. I think that'd be a really interesting thing to do. That'd be certainly grade appropriate for upper middle school and high school students.
And Patricia recommended to Francis's question about Japanese colonial rule, the book Lost Names. That's the one that I was trying to remember the title of. It's on the colonial period and is by a male author named Richard. It's Lost Names, Scenes from a Korean Boyhood, and it's by Richard Kim.
Great. And did you have any other favorites in terms of resources for older learners, Jennifer?
I really like the wide-angle films. Those documentaries like Field Trip to the DMZ, A State of Mind, and Crossing Heaven's Borders. Wide-angle just does a really great job with their documentaries, and they're usually very short. So they can be used in one class period. Some of them are available on their website. They have the teacher resources on their website too, where you can use clips so that you don't have to use the whole film. But I think those are really valuable for high school kids.
I agree. The field trip to the DMZ is actually linked to in that third activity in the online curriculum cluster as a way that if your students aren't particularly familiar with what the DMZ is or how this division has actually emotionally and physically affected people and families who have relatives on either side of the border, the field trip to the DMZ is a fantastic film that is really accessible for students of high school and maybe even 8th grade, and really puts kind of a geographic issue into really personal and vivid terms. I think all of those films are great resources.
And I just put the DMZ actually has a website that is dmz.gg.go.kr. I just put that in the chat box to everybody. But it's very interesting to look at. They have a section on the reunification of families who have been separated. There's a historical overview of the area. So much before it was the DMZ, kind of the history of that particular region of Korea. And then it talks about the border and what it means to have a border there, and what the border itself means, and then also what the possibilities are for reunification. So that's an interesting website too if you're using that field trip to the DMZ video, that you might want to take a look at that website.
Great, and it looks like, I'm not sure if Patricia raised her hand again or if that her hand just never got taken down from the last one.
Patricia, did you have another question?
No, I don't. I didn't have another question.
Okay. I think I forgot to put the hand down.
All right.
Thanks for all of your great questions.
Yeah, these were really fantastic. And again, I think Jennifer and I are both happy to field future questions if they come to you. As she said, her email is just jennifer@primarysource.org, and I'm elizabeth@primarysource.org. So feel free if any questions come to you after today to contact us. We'd also like to share with you a few other online opportunities coming up with Primary Source. Tomorrow, actually, is our global read of The Queen of Water. It's a book based in Ecuador about an Indigenous girl's coming of age story, and it's a biographical novel, I guess we could say. And we'll be having a webinar with the author tomorrow and a time for Q&A. Even if you haven't read the book, you might want to think about logging in for it. You can always get the recording and then watch the webinar after you actually read the book. It should be great. It's great for students and a really interesting story of a girl's experiences that I think could be translated to a lot of different students and their lives. And we also have on December 11th a webinar that we're co-sponsoring with IREX, and it will focus on the role of storytelling in African culture with a focus on Uganda. And for this one, we'll have an expert from Boston University providing some context on the more regional role of storytelling in Africa, and then a teacher who's actually on the ground in Uganda who will talk a bit about storytelling in her classroom and in education and in the lives of people in her community. So if you're interested in that or any of our other online programs, you can learn about those and register at primarysource.org/online courses. And that URL is right at the bottom of the screen there. Other than that, we just want to thank everyone for taking time today to join us for this webinar. We hope you took away some good teaching ideas and perhaps some resources that you'll be able to use. We hope you share them freely and widely with your colleagues and associates. And again, we know what a busy time of year it is and what busy days we all have. So we really appreciate you spending with us this time. We invite you to keep in touch, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, or always check us out at www.primarysource.org. You can find out about what we're doing face-to-face and online. And we hope to see you either face-to-face or virtually in a future webinar. Thanks so much and have a great night. And if you do have time, when you close out, you'll have a 3-question survey. We'd really appreciate it if you could complete that. It'll help us serve your needs in the future. Thanks so much.